Hello and a very warm welcome to everyone. I am Shrija Agrawal, and you are watching our thought leadership discussion on building ESG compliance, a perspective from thought leaders. Before we get into the discussion, it's important to do some context setting on just how ESG, which stands for environmental, social, and corporate governance, is such an essential part of all boardroom conversations now. Just sample this. In his annual note to investors, BlackRock CEO Larry Fink said, I believe we are on the edge of a fundamental reshaping of finance because of climate change. The BlackRock chief pledged to adopt climate considerations when managing its clients' 7 billion in assets under management. Fink isn't alone in seemingly newfound interest in climate change. Buoyed by activist investors and violent wildfires, hurricanes, and tornadoes, along with the rising temperatures, large capital providers are looking for solutions to climate change. Such realizations are also being seen in the world of technology. For instance, it was a really interesting moment when Yahoo Finance added the sustainability tab on their website where anybody can go and find out what the ESG performance of a company is and how that compares to its competitors. As companies begin to consider climate change, it only makes sense that they look at the buildings they inhabit and own. Real estate is responsible for around 40% of global carbon emissions, according to the World Economic Forum. Clearly, we are seeing strong momentum in environmental, social, and governance principles. In particular, how governance and climate related risks impact investment decisions. Now, COVID 19 is changing the nature of the conversations. Biodiversity and the connection between people and nature is an issue that demands more attention and better understanding than ever before. There's also a renewed focus on good governance as we ask the question, when times get tough, will companies do the right thing? We have a pretty meaningful panel here, and we will strive to ask them such questions and decode the behavior of companies in this direction. Happy to share that we are doing this in partnership with GBCI, Green Business Certification Inc., the exclusive body to administer the Leadership in Energy and Environment Design, the LEAD program. Please help me welcome Chris Pyke, Senior Vice President Product at ArcSkoru GBCI, Ms. Jagvinder Pinny Mann, Senior Portfolio Manager, Microsoft, Rajat Malhotra, Executive Director, Head of Engineering Operations, APAC Corporate Solutions at JLL, and Gautam, Director, DLF Power and Services Limited. Gentlemen and ladies, thank you so much for joining. And it's a pretty meaningful panel here. And thank you for putting the time and energy to this. It means a lot to us, to the Mint viewers. Chris, let me begin with you. Just like the opening statement before I get on to Penny here, that while the current public health crisis and increased climate change events have fueled a heightened focus on ESG, the benefits of ESG compliance go much deeper than managing reputational risk and dealing with the immediate social distancing norms. In your view, what trends are you seeing in terms of increasing awareness about ESGs, particularly in India during the pandemic? I mean, who is driving demand for ESG information? How are companies in India responding? And how do green buildings help companies in India meet expectations for ESG performance?
Oh, thank you so much. Those are excellent questions, and it is really a privilege to be with you in this conversation. And so, taking your question head on, I think what we have had, the pandemic has been a stress test or a litmus test for ESG. We've been on a journey with environmental social governance for over a decade, and we've had academic information that tells us that ESG information is correlated with market outperformance. So it's not just, as you said, it's not just a thing to do to feel good or a thing you should do. It is for investors correlated with market returns. However, we had never in that time stress tested those metrics against a down market, a real exogenous shock. So COVID clearly has given us that shock. And it turns out that around the world, ESG leaders outperform. And in turn, a component when you are a corporate occupier or a property company, then ESG is reflected in the performance of your assets, how you manage them, how they perform, and into the future. We're going to see that that trend continues. ESG is a predictor of outperformance. and it goes all the way down to more granular issues like the health and wellness of your team, the retention of your staff, or if you're offering property to others, the attractiveness of your offerings. So we are in the middle of a sea change where invisible information, ESG, non-material, non-financial information, is being deemed to be relevant to the investment and ownership process. It's an exciting time for this conversation. Thanks for that.
Thanks for that, Chris. Pinky, I come to you, and I think Chris just mentioned that ESG is extremely relevant now. The non-material, non-financial information, perhaps first time in many, many years, in decade, the focus is really on that. I want to understand from you, Pinky, you represent a very large global tech organization, and as an employer and occupier of corporate office space, how do you think ESG standards weaved into the corporate fabric help a company plan for long term growth and improve performance of both the employees and the business in general? I mean, how does investing in green building also contribute overall towards cost efficiency, especially a key factor as companies are still facing the impact of the pandemic economic hit? What are your views there in this direction, Pinny?
Thank you, firstly, for having me here. It's a real honor and a pleasure to be amongst such elite panelists and yourself. The COVID really had brought the globe to its knees, as I always say that. And I think it's become even more relevant that we all need to start thinking. Let's take a pause and move forward. Large organizations already had that, but there was never enough focus. I think sitting across the boardrooms, it was a tick in the box. And I think now everyone cannot tick it. You just have to have it and you've got to report it out. Well, I'm from a very elite organization, and our CEO Satya already has announced 2030 as carbon neutral. We have, zero waste at our sites. We're self-reliant on our water. So there are a lot of, thoughts and ideas going around, but I fear the implementation. I think governments have to make it a mandate. Like, it's a LEED building certified. How are we getting into green buildings? How are we going to impact and differentiate from one to the other? As yet, it's only a A plus building, or is it grade A, or is it a LEED certified, or is it platinum certified? Then comes to the real estate world where let's say that the government has made it mandate, and then how do they pick it up? There is a cost, there is tenancy. People may take it, may not take it. How does that work? What are the subsidies the government can support with to encourage this? Health and wellness is going to be on top of the cards. If you want to hire the best talent, you're going to have to answer some pertinent questions with the youth today. They are very well aware. Let's say pandemic has actually communicated much more broadly and clearly what needs to be done to the planet and what a mess we've made of it so far. So I think collectively we'll have to lead, and some organizations will lead the way, show the way, and support each other and pull along everyone. I think it is important. You want to retain talent, you want the higher talent, you want to talk about it. It's a story you should be proud about, not something that you're putting back into your books and putting away. And cost, yes, Shrija, cost is important. It is an important factor to run business, but we've got to weigh the pros and cons. And I think we all have to come up with thoughtful ideas, creativity, and see how we take this forward. Thank you.
And
Back to you,
thanks
Shrija.
for that, Finny. Yeah, I think some very meaningful insights coming here. I mean, she categorically mentioned that a tick in the box is not enough, and it's time enough to get some thoughtful ideas and solutions going. Cost is important, but we don't perhaps need another pandemic to shake us out of our black swan blindness to really understand how important ESG really is. Gautam, I come to you now. We just heard both Chris and Penny sort of giving us some very broad indicators on really where ESG is headed. What really are the opening comments on this? I want to understand from you, Gautam, that from a DLF perspective, which really is taking a lead in ESG in the real estate sector in India. Where is the Indian construction and real estate industry overall, when it comes to awareness about ESG, compliance, and benefits? If you were to give me an external outsider view, is there enough receptivity about ESG compliance? And what more can be done by industry bodies, the government, industry leaders in the sector to really improve that?
Thank you, Shrija, for inviting me and giving me opportunity to share my views with all. Of course, ESG is no longer a nice to have situation. Now, you know that a lot of stock exchanges already issued mandate and or in the process of issuing the mandate for declaring the ESG reporting guidelines of the companies. And all signs indicate that investors, particularly in the foreign private equity funds, are placing more focus on ESG data when deciding where to invest. That's very, very important. And the other factors which impacting the growth of ESG and which is helping ESG is the evolution of approach to the greener economy and action by the global peers. Definitely there is a stress on everybody that we need to perform on the ESG front also, and the increased interest from all the investors like SBI Magnum, Quantum Magnum ESG fund, Kotak ESG funds, and then you go to the Nifty 100 ESG index, then Nifty 150 enhanced ESG index, and S&P BSE GreenX. There are lot of actions which is happening around, and of course challenges in ESG investment in India. It's not a organized so far. It's a lack of quality data within the organization. That's very, very important. We have a lot of data inside the organization, but there is no cohesiveness between the segments within the organization. So that's very important. The lack of quality data is definitely has to overcome by the organization, and then lack of market standards. There is no standards as on date in the market, or it's not the benchmark I'm talking about. Then the conventional mindset, as Penny was saying, it's not the checkbox. We have to change our mindset. It's a end of the day. It's a cost also. Cost is also involved, but not. I don't think the cost is going to overrule everything every time. And the pandemic has shown us the way how to take care of our ESG sentiments across. And then, of course, lack of track record in the ESG funds. That's very important. There should be advocacy or advertisement well enough to, and the motivation for the organization to come forward and with a ESG, better player, or there should be competition in the world, or rather the business world in India in terms of the ESG. That's what I wanted to convey.
Okay, thanks, Gautam. That was sort of meaningful. You spoke about quite a few things. You spoke about the fact that there's a lack of standard data, there's lack of perhaps cohesive data within the organization. While there's data available, there's different spaces, different departments not talking to each other. And you also said the fact that, and I think that is a reality that, long-term providers of capital, the sophisticated investors who are providing the locked-in capital, the private equity investors, are definitely pushing the envelope here when it comes to ESG. I mean, that is really the mandate that they're providing to their portfolio companies, that ESG is extremely important to them as the part of the investment charter. I come to you now, Rajat. We heard from all of them, Gautam, Pinny, and Chris, their opening remarks on where we are on the ESG life cycle, what does it really mean for different parts of the organization. I come to you now here and I want to understand the real estate services firm, what are the trends you see in India in terms of acceptance of new technology that improves the value and performance of real estate assets? Do investors today actively look out for assets that are grade A quality, green buildings? I mean, is there still hesitation when it comes to the cost aspect of green buildings? Or are people looking at the larger picture and understanding the long term benefits of investing in green buildings? What are you hearing from the real estate market and from investors who are looking at RE?
Thanks so much, Shrija. Firstly, thank you so much to the panelists. Brilliant to see Gautam, Pinny as well, and our privilege, of course, to be rubbing shoulders with all of them on this panel. So I think let me tackle the technology question first, Shrija. There are three distinct areas, right? While these are three interrelated areas, there is still a lot of evolution happening in these areas, right, of technology. Now, the first is building performance, right? And that includes monitoring, controlling, building operations with clear objectives to drive efficiency in performance. The outcomes are being sought are an ability to monitor and control a building remotely. Remote operation especially has received a lot of interest and attention due to the pandemic when the mobility of operators, right, building operators was severely constrained, right? The second element within building performance is how do you actually bring down the cost of operations maintenance? And that is currently being transformed. So how do you do that? By introducing predictive and reliability-centric maintenance approaches, right? And technology is playing a big role in it. And because it has the ability to bring down the cost of building maintenance by making a system which is monitoring a building more smart and intelligent, there's a lot of interest which is being generated in predictive insights being generated by technology, right? Through AI ML systems. And we are seeing a lot of investments happening and a lot of startups which are investing, effort in coming up with digital twins of buildings, of assets, asset subtypes, and then driving the performance of those assets. It's very interesting. If you're able to do that, then we are moving away from a time-based maintenance approach, which we've been doing for the past maybe 500-600 years, to a more reliability-centric maintenance approach. So it's to simplify it, you take your car, for example, every 6 months to get it serviced, right? What if I tell you that you don't need to take your car because I have the smarts installed in your car, and your car itself is going to tell me when it needs to go and get serviced, right? So you're saving that 6 months of maintenance, even though your car may have been parked in the garage for more than 60% of the time, you don't have to go and maintain it. So we are talking of those elements of technology coming in, and we are seeing definitely an adoption because they're focused around building performance, right? Energy plus also cost of maintenance. The second bit, which I think has received a fantastic fillip in the pandemic, is IEQ and indoor environmental quality enabled by technology. So I'm saying guaranteeing indoor environmental quality enabled by technology. So Pinny spoke about, the occupants being very, very aware. The occupier in India is a very young occupier, right? He comes with an ecosystem of apps anywhere to work. So the expectations are that the building or the environment he's going to be made to work in is absolutely super and helps him in his productivity and health and well-being. So if you're able to guarantee indoor environmental quality through technology and then monitor it and report it through a technology interface, what more do you want, right? That's what the occupier is wanting. And that's what a building operator like myself is wanting to do as well, because that's a real metric, right? I should be measured in the IEQ I'm being able to provide in a building which I'm responsible for operating and maintaining, right? That should be my measure. That's an outcome which should be measured. So that's the second part. The third part is, we in JLL, we call it the 330-300 principle. You spend 300, you spend essentially $300 per square foot per annum on just people, right? Any business does, and 30 on the real estate. So you're saying that let's use technology to optimize real estate. And we are saying that means optimize the utilization of real estate, getting the maximum bang for the buck from every square feet that you're paying lease on. You're able to do that with the help of technology. So three elements or three domains of technology adoption, and all of these domains have received a fillip, and I would think greater adoption, much higher appetite after the last 10 months, right? So that's technology. I think the second part of the question is around green buildings, right? And whether there's an appetite for grade A buildings and green buildings. Let me tell you one thing, Shrija, in green buildings in India now are about 2 decades old, right? And in 2000, when we came up with the first green building, most of the green certified products which went into a green building did not come from within the country. Today, 100% of what goes into a building that makes it green or that makes it certified as green, it could be silver, gold, or platinum, is locally sourced. So therefore, the cost differential has come down. So I think that cost conversation is really a done and dusted conversation. We're not talking of cost being a major factor in investors or in owners or in occupiers when they look at grade A green buildings, because that cost differential, the business case is now proven and it's accepted. So I think when it comes to grade A space, you are seeing we add in the 7 major cities, we add between 40 to 50 million square feet per annum of grade A commercial space. And all of that, I'm saying all of that, in the next 4 years is going to be green certified, some level of certification, right? What I'm concerned about is the grade B space as well, right? You're looking at the mid-market developers, investors, what's going to happen in those spaces? And that I think is a challenge for us. And I do agree, and I do completely endorse what Pinny has suggested, is there has to be some regulatory framework. And I'm not a believer in the stick policy. I believe in the carrot and stick policy. So I think it has to be a combination of regulation and incentive. So I'll shut up here. But yeah, that's essentially what I had to say.
That's pretty meaningful, Rajat. I think you spoke about quite a few things. That technology adoption is on the anvil in a pretty big way. You spoke about the fact that the occupiers are very, very sophisticated now. They are young. They're much more informed than the yesteryears. And I think there's generally awareness in buildings and employers also to provide the satisfaction to the end customer. And I think that's concern that how does it become more mainstream? How do you also get the mid-market developers, the grade B spaces back into the conversation is something which is really at the heart of the discussion today. And I think I would like to get the views of Chris and Penny also in this direction. Chris, I think we heard from all the panelists here about really the growing importance of about ESG, and how the COVID has just only accelerated that conversation. The past 10 months have really brought it back into the consciousness of investors and people at large. But tell me one thing, I have seen the story play out many, many years back also, especially with, renewable energy, for instance. You know, there were companies, everybody wanted to label itself green. I have seen this also play out for impact investing, where everybody wanted to say that we are impact investors. I mean, ultimately, if you are an entrepreneur, you are impacting something or the other, right? I mean, you're providing employment to people. But how do you measure such things? How do you measure these kind of, intangible benefits? So there was basically a lot of greenwashing happening, especially when a lot of investors said that, okay, if this is green, let's put in money there. Impact investing, so many GPs went down to raise money from LPs saying, oh, what we are doing is impact investing. I want to understand from you that, just given the two things, digital transformation and ESG is such a big part post the COVID conversation. I mean, can we see something called ESG washing at large, especially, because there's so much focus from private equity investors to push the envelope of ESG. I mean, what is your sense? I mean, are you seeing some such trends globally and in India?
Yeah, I think this is. Thank you. That's a great question, and let me address it with. I think if we take this all the way back, yes, if you take something like a Gartner sort of hype cycle, and you kind of say, hey, have we climbed that hype cycle before, and maybe gotten our aspiration ahead of our capability? Absolutely. Is there essentially over demand for a product that wasn't quite baked yet, a high performing ESG quality real estate or corporate product? Absolutely. That contributes to that ESG washing or greenwashing. What is different about this moment is that we are now 25 years in as as we were hearing earlier, into the green building revolution. We are a decade into the ESG revolution, and this is accompanied by information technology. So my point is that we have an enabling environment that is vastly stronger than it was 10 years ago. And we have a better understanding about the importance of providing high quality data about both corporate management and on the ground delivered performance. The way you get around, the way you avoid greenwashing is delivering performance. And so if you look at the kind of vertically integrated stack that we've been working on with the US Green Building Council and GBCI, we have a technology platform called ARC that's being used for existing buildings and spaces that is addressing that and broadening the funnel, creating opportunities even down market for Class A, focusing on delivered operational performance. We then linked it in the pandemic to our reentry tools that help people, that recognize and empower folks to have a systematic, safe and confident return to work, and working our way up toward LEED with a holistic approach, and then all the way toward corporate ESG disclosures, whatever that might be. Those are all enabled by technology that both does things like preventive maintenance, as we were talking about, and also streamlines the flow of high quality information from the asset to the enterprise and on to the stakeholders. We haven't had the capability to do that in a robust and scalable way until quite recently. I think when we look into the next 3, 5, 10 years, the combination of maturity and vertical integration of tools enabled by powerful information technology and inspired by the global interest of the capital markets will accelerate the adoption of the things we've been talking about and make them more robust and prevent the concerns about greenwashing. At the end of the day, the bottom line is greenwashing isn't an issue when you deliver performance on the ground. And when you can show it through appropriate information technology, that's where we're heading. So I appreciate that question. I'm looking forward to Penny's perspective.
Yeah. Penny, I want to sort of get you in here. I think sort of very meaningful comments made here by Chris. I think he gave a very sort of clear and wide picture as to, what can really accelerate the adoption and what really is needed to do in that direction. I want to also understand, and, what was sort of referred by Rajat very clearly, that, his pain point really is the grade B spaces, the mid-market developers. I mean, you are part of a large global organization where there are big sustainability teams, there's capital, there's wherewithal, there's draft policies, guidelines to develop greener products, enter high-level agreements. And there tends to be quicker decision-making and higher flexibility and less bureaucracy. I remember you telling us that, it is non-negotiable at Microsoft, absolutely, when it comes to sustainability, governance, and environment. Your chieftain actually went on record to say, his commitment towards these areas. But, in India, when we talk about India's GDP, I mean, our heart, our backbone really is the services industry. And within that is the SME and the MSME space, Pinny. I mean, how can we bring back this into the consciousness of those organizations, really, is the question I wanted to put to this panel.
Yeah, thank you, Shrija. I think, like, not to sound repetitive, I think pandemic has done the communication. Pandemic has really raised the awareness. And in India, we have a very young population who is so aware today, they're going to demand it. When the demand comes in, businesses have no choice. You want to hire? Well, you have to have some parameters that you're going to talk about in your hiring strategy. So I think, not to have it would not be a good answer for any business that's growing. And speed to adoption, agility to understand. What happens is large orgs lead the way, but it's not the Pied Piper kind of thing that everyone will follow. People feel, oh, they have deep pockets, so they are doing something. It is hard to tell them that how important it is. And Rajat alluded to that point, air quality. Indoor air quality, today we have monitors which are real time showing what the air quality is. And people are interested in seeing it. They want to know. We've had experiences if in a conference room, the air quality is not up to the mark, people say, can we move out from here? So it's going to be a demand case. And the sooner businesses understand it, the better it is. We are talking of green buildings, we are talking of environment, we are talking of sustainability, we are talking of diverse workforce, diversity, inclusion. How are you going to be like that? And countering that, there are some fundamental thoughts also that, oh, with technology, jobs are lost. I think we need to touch that point very softly here. Jobs are not lost. Jobs are still there. It's just the data is more true. You are not putting in a manual checklist versus a data that's being picked and given to you. So I think there are multiple aspects, and I really am looking forward to the government push on it, state governments pushing it. Like Karnataka said, solar power, everyone started adopting it. Why can't other states follow? We need to have a big push from the government. And of course, large orgs like us are really talking about it. We are talking to our employees. We are talking to our developer partners that these are the parameters we want to meet. Please reach. Accessibility is the big one for us also. We are actually getting our developers to create accessibility in their buildings if they haven't got it. Because if you want us to occupy, you've got to meet these criterias and parameters, otherwise we cannot be your tenant. So I think it has to be a mixed bag with push, with governance, with thoughtfulness. And I think business leaders really need to start thinking differently.
Okay, that was very well. So Rajat, I come to you now, and I think just taking on to what Pinny just mentioned, that as a Microsoft, as an organization, perhaps they have the bargaining power, to tell the developer that we will not be your tenant if you don't meet these standards. I want to ask from you that can you give us some specific example that inspires you or illustrates future practice when we're talking about, this green building, getting into the mainstream consciousness, or the fact that the entire ESG conversation becoming more and more mainstream. Give us some specific examples here, Rajat.
Okay, this is awesome, right? This discussion is awesome. So I think, I tend to look at the positive side when you're talking of this trend taking on the entire spectrum of this sector, right? So I think if you ask me, and Chris has alluded to it already in the last decade of ESG having been around, expectations have fundamentally changed in the real estate sector, right? Investors are increasingly, and occupiers are increasingly asking for greater transparency about ESG, right? Regulators are mandating even more ESG disclosures than ever before, right? And if you look at just some 2020 reports, and GRESB has put out one, there's been greater adoption of lead arc re-entry, or you look at well HSR. So we are seeing a greater adoption of these rating systems as well. And that's, to me, as a good indicator, right? I'm talking of a more global trend, which is affecting, influencing, and impacting the entire real estate sector, right? If you look at just the participation, it has grown between 20 to 30% in 2020, just even despite of COVID, right? To me, that's really encouraging, isn't it? And if you ask me, private sector is always leading that growth trend, right? The participation has increased by more than 30%, right? And on the listed side, and Gautam ji has already talked of various frameworks which are currently available, you have an increase in properties which are reported to GRESP by more than 13%. And I'm talking of 271 or REITs that are in existence today. So I think there is a global trend, which is a positive phenomenon, right? The pandemic now, what has the pandemic done? The pandemic has called upon the mid-size and smaller size companies also to shift their focus. But how are you going to make a step change? Because, if you look at what's happening in the world, while we are saying net zero, while we are saying, limit emissions to less than 2 degrees impact, are we really getting there? I'm not very, very sure, right? I'm not very, very sure. If you look at the the reports which have been set out by the participating nations, there are very few countries which are actually meeting their commitments. So are we making that step change? What's happening actually to the environment? We are talking about the environment at the end of the day, right? What's happening to the environment? So I don't think so. And Penny's already spoken of this, and I think Chris alluded to this also. We have the luxury of time anymore. So since we do not have the luxury of time, we need to make those changes in our regulatory framework, make it more consistent. Within the governance, we have to make it more mainstream. We can't just rely on private sector uptake of commitment to ESG. We have to make it more top down as well. And when that is done, the awareness also spreads in the occupier and the investor even more, right? So you're creating a demand. I'll give you a very nice example. You asked me for a specific example, and then you take this from a very different sector. Look at consumer goods. Pinny and Gautam ji would agree with me. I actually went into a retail store the other day, and this was pre-COVID. And there was a lady, obviously of very modest means. She was trying to buy a refrigerator, right? And she asked the salesman, and he's a pure sales guy. You see these guys in the malls. They don't have too much of a technical knowledge, of course. So she asked him, what are these stars which are showing on this refrigerator? So this guy, and Chris, you're going to excuse me for this. I'm going to use some bit of local dialect here. Is this guy said, he says, if there are 5 stars, isse aapka light bill kam aayega. And you know what? I'm not joking. It took 5 minutes of conversation. And she said, yes, I want to buy a 5-star refrigerator for home. Even though she was shelling out 4 to 7% higher than what she would have paid for a 3-star or a 4-star. What is this indicating to us? Pinny has already alluded to this. We need to create that demand, right? We have such a huge population moving from rural to urban areas. If you're able to create the awareness and demand, if you have a top-down approach of giving regulatory, a conducive regulatory environment, I'm not saying give laws which you cannot implement. If you look at the environmental clearance, and Gautam ji would agree with me, the first 2 years were nightmares for developers and us as well, because the government talked of environmental clearance, but the entire infrastructure to be able to accord these clearances in time did not happen. And we had reached a stage when there was 2 years of backlog of buildings and projects waiting for environmental clearance from the environmental clearance authorities. So we can't afford that kind of thing anymore, right? So if there's a top-down approach, it has to be thought through. And these are the specific examples. You're seeing large Indian-born MNCs committing to ESG, committing to performance, and committing to transparency of reporting. To me, that's really, really encouraging, right? When you are leading the way and saying, I'm going to report my performance, and when you're making bold statements to your shareholders saying, I'm going to go net zero, and I can tell you which are the companies, including our own, we have a net zero goal of 2035. When you make these specific announcements to your shareholders, you're really putting your money where your mouth is, right? And the effort and the investment where your mouth is. So I think we need such commitments to create the kind of right examples and become exemplars for the mid-market segment as well. And I think the positive thing is we're seeing a trend. It is a global trend. And it is, if this trend is accelerated by governance and by awareness, I think we'll be able to make that step change.
Okay, that's well said. We will be able to make a step change. Just to sort of clarify for Chris, the example that Rajat gave was essentially of a woman trying to buy a refrigerator. And when she posed the question to the salesperson that what do these 5 stars mean on the refrigerator handle, because they essentially stand for energy efficiency, the salesman told her in a very local dialect that your electricity bill will be halved by this. And with that nudge, that sales nudge, she actually bought it, even if she had to shell out 4 to 7% higher. So the entire idea was to, translate to the general people at large that how incorporating green also translates into, saving for them, and that can actually bring back the consciousness. But let me ask a very hard-hitting question to the panel. Really, I mean, it's good to talk green, it's good to talk about the benefits of green, but I think just to take towards what Rajat just said, the top down, I mean, how many government buildings in India are green, really? I mean, government occupies such large spaces. I mean, are they green? Are any of them green? Is a question I wanted to ask. And this government does so many initiatives like Make in India, Startup India. And if we have the ambition to become a 5 trillion economy by 2025, which is completely tied, if we don't become carbon neutral, if we don't have an agenda, a nationwide agenda to be green, I don't see how that can be fulfilled ever. So why don't we have this from the government at the top, just trying to understand that your financial objectives are so tied to the energy objectives? So Pinny, what is really lacking from the understanding of government in that direction? Because we have a government which it says Bharat Clean India, everybody takes a broom and starts cleaning it.
Yeah.
Startup India, look at the drive that we have had. Make in India, look at what we did. Why can't we have a green India narrative built here?
Yeah, I agree with you, definitely. And smart cities was a huge project launched by the Prime Minister. Do you know, I'll go back to in time and I say that pandemic has taken us back into our thinking modes and back to our grandparents and great grandparents. Everything starts at home. If you don't start at your own home and your own roots, you're not going to be able to expand it. And to your point, Shrija, government needs to do that. I mean, every time you go to the government office, you'll see these rickety old ACs working, which must be consuming God knows how much of power. And are they really efficient? Nowhere near it. Nobody cares. Just today, in fact, I was seeing in the news is the new railway station, New Delhi railway station, which is going to be, I don't know what stars they're going to build it on. The ambition is there, but the implementation is lacking. I think that's the crux of everything. And each one of us has to contribute to it. It cannot, I won't say only the government can do it. State governments, municipalities, cities, developers, occupiers, business leaders, everyone needs to start coming together. I'll share a small incident. Many, many years ago, I was working with a great organization called G. And, we used to plant trees every February and every August because we had 4 distinct seasons in the north of the country. And it was a mandate. It wasn't anything extraordinary. Nobody thought it was something out of the box that we are doing. It's a must. Today, let me ask, who's thinking about the environment? The pandemic has brought us to our knees to think about it. Let me tell you, the government can only do this much and more. What is it we should ask ourselves? What is it that we can do? And how do we build that energy and that focus into each and every area that we want? If we want green buildings, let's start work. Let's start thinking about it. And each of those examples can really be blown up and showcased. So I think it has to start. There is just no way. I am absolutely optimistic and positive that each one of us needs to contribute first and then ask the questions.
Okay. I want to sort of bring Gautam here. Gautam, you heard all the panelists. First of all, any specific comments that you want to add in that direction before I have a specific question for you?
I fully agree with the panelists. There is a strong demand from the occupier side also. Being a developer and the leading leader in the ESG front, uh, definitely I have seen a drastic approach or change towards a green building, green building or rather the well building, wellness of the building. So we had a lot of things to do in the ESG front, but still whatever we could do, and we have done our best. And I'll share with you, as a leader in ESG, we have gone into that wellness certification, certification from international Delos and IWBI, after going through all the checks and balances in terms of cleanliness, in terms of precautions. And of course, we cannot eliminate COVID virus completely, but whatever we could do from the developer side, we have done it. And as far as uh, this wellness is concerned, there are two segments. One is the physical contribution, or other, and another is a, as Rajat was mentioning, that indoor air quality is very, very important. Indoor air quality is very important, and that IAQ is going to play a very important role. It's not the only the uh, quality of the air, but the quantum of air is also important. In pandemic situation, we have ensured that our volume of air goes inside the, occupier's place should be of a highest degree, highest level. So those kind of aspects we have taken into account. And yes, I'm waiting for your this. I think we are in the right direction as far as developer and occupier collaborations are concerned. So I'm happy to learn from others also.
Tell me one thing, Gautam. I mean, whenever we have this conversation about green buildings, I see a heightened awareness from the likes of, say, Microsoft or a Google or an Accenture, especially the IT companies. I mean, do you also see a similar kind of participation or interest from, Indian homegrown companies, say like Reliance or Aditya Birla Group or the Tatas, who are the large employers of huge, workforces here? I'm not getting into startups here because startups generally tend to work out of WeWorks and the likes. Even perhaps the well capitalized startups or the unicorns should definitely also push the agenda for green buildings. But from a developer perspective, can you give us some trends in that direction? Because you have tenants of wide variety.
Yeah, yeah.
What is the sense that you can give us here?
As I said, we have to have a high degree of wellness inside the building. Wellness, when talk about the wellness, it's, as I mentioned, I'm repeating, I'm sorry to repeat, wellness is not only the cleanliness, and the, you have to make it mandatory for our own team, as well as in collaboration with our occupier. So minimum standard of cleanliness is required inside the building. In addition to uh, full uh, fresh air intake is very, very important in this particularly pandemic situation. And we have gone one step ahead. Internationally, all the buildings, all the commercial space internationally, they occupy, or they engage their AHUs, air handling units. I'm going technical with the MOF filters. So those MOF filters has a degree of purification. That MOF 13s are normally used globally. In DLF, we have gone into one step higher. That we have gone for MOF 14. So I think recently it is in the news across the segment. So that gave us a lot of confidence, and all, including Penny. Penny is our esteemed uh, client. So all the tenants had accepted gladly that kind of initiative which we have taken as a leader in this developing fund. So there is no end. We can go into the water sustainability, we can go into the power, and we can go to any extent. But this focus on ESG. ESG is nothing but, if you see the E and the G component, is okay. The people are taking care of it, but the S component is very important. S sometimes is get confused between safety and the social. And this S component, when we talk about the social is always the collaborative effort. It's a collaboration between the partner. Partner can be our occupier, partner can be our associates through whom we are making the treating our systems. So those collaborative effort will lead us uh, to a great ESG arena.
Yeah, thanks, Gautam. Thanks for that. I sort of get on to you now, Chris. We heard from the panelists, and I think the discussion was going on a very interesting, and we took a very interesting tangent there. I wanted to sort of revive that. Really, I personally feel that, what at large, if I were to see the trend and being the observer of businesses for about a decade now, I think it's the first time where I'm seeing that we have really moved from shareholder capitalism to stakeholder capitalism. For the first time, when the boardroom conversations have moved beyond just shareholder returns to involving everybody as your stakeholder. So, who are your stakeholders? Your stakeholders are your employers, your stakeholders are your clients, your stakeholders are your alliance partners that you work with, and you make all of them part of the conversation, their wellness, their health, and everything. It was the first time where organizations have taken so much personal attention, the chieftains and the leaders, talking about employees' health, seeing to it that the offices are designed better, seeing to it to define that the workplaces of the future, how should they be defined. Earlier, this work was relegated to be the HR work. Now you see the CEOs, CFOs, and CXOs talking about this at boardroom meetings. This is coming into the quarterly calls to journalists. This is how we are thinking about building our organizations. This is how we mean to reopen our spaces. So I think the conversation has really become as mainstream as possible. These are the very important questions addressed by the heads of the organization now. Now, as we look at reopening our spaces, both residential, commercial, and offices, I want to understand from you, Chris, that we talk about the home of the future, the office of the future. What really are some of the basic tools, such as ARC, that especially the mid-market segment can use in order to build their ESG footprints and ultimately sustain long-term growth?
Yeah, that's a great question. And as you said, this is just to kind of resonate with something you said. I think that we there has been a growing acceptance that this is fundamental to business. And just to give you an example of where do people feel that change? When your director of sustainability or your VP for ESG, that you have one, and two, when that person is asked to by investor relations to be in the room during your quarterly or your annual update and to share their work, the fact that that is a thing, and that is a thing today that happens on a regular basis for larger companies, that's a breakthrough. And that is so empowering and so vertically integrated. So to your specific point, this issue of what does it take to go back into these spaces? What is it? So our experience, and maybe I'll just share, over the past, we launched what we were doing with reentry about the same time, back in June, trying to meet the moment. Since that time, we have been working with a major India-based technology company, a multinational industrial manufacturer in India, a primary school in India, so a cross-section of people who are working with property. Consistently, they are engaging with us for two reasons. They are engaging with us because they have a long-term commitment to sustainability. That goes back to your Larry Fink quote. They are on a journey toward that. They have a short-run need to promote a safe return to work. And one thing I would emphasize is that Rajat said earlier that the classic JLL 330-300, that has been a guiding principle for how we prioritize wellness in our spaces. However, COVID has told us something different. COVID has said that health and well-being and the management of your facility is about the asset value. Can you use your facility at all? Not are you 3% more productive or lowering your operating costs. Can you use it at all? Can you bring 90% of your workforce back to work? That's a big difference. And we are gonna the 330-300 proposition exists. It's a real thing, and we should own it. But COVID told us something more. If you want to get value out of your asset at all, you need to do these things. That's 100% of the asset. So what does that mean? That means Also recognizing this is a systematic management process. That means a repeated process to set your plans, policies, and procedures based on current public health guidance. It says checking in with your occupants and your employees to see if they perceive the benefits of what you've done, and using technology to measure IAQ and IEQ, as we heard earlier, and to do it not once, but iteratively over time, and to communicate with your stakeholders. That is actually the moment we're in, whether you're a high-tech firm, whether you're an industrial company, or whether you're a school. It just wasn't that way. And so it's exciting to see that progress over even just the last 6 months. And I think we're creating a stronger foundation for what we've been talking about today. So thanks for that question. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for that. That was pretty meaningful. I come to you now, Rajat, and we're getting into the last round of our discussion, the concluding remarks, really. First of all, let me ask you that, any comments that you wanted to sort of offer to what have been offered so far, Rajat?
So I think, Shrija, you also posed a very interesting question on what are we seeing with Indian bond companies. I think we are seeing most definitely, let's not call them in any way not committed. We have some very aggressive targets. There are some leaders in this space. We work with a large number of Indian born IT giants, and all of them have got science-based targets. They have thought through their objectives. Many of them have got net zero targets as well, right? So I can rattle off a list as well, but I'm not sure that's the call of this discussion. But let's be very clear that the Indian firms are also committing equally themselves to ESG, and in more ways than one. So there are cogent steps that they're taking. They're transparently reporting as well, right? And you'll see in large IT/ITES firms, all the large IT/ITES firms, you have transparency in reporting. You look at their investor reports, all of them will have their performance around ESG. So I think we have a lot of hope there that large Indian businesses are leading the way and setting the right example for the smaller Indian businesses. You talked of startups, etc. But I think the large Indian businesses are also setting the example for the smaller Indian businesses, which is very important to us, right? This country is the second most populous, and obviously it is the largest democracy in terms of population as well. So I think it's very important that it's all pervading these trends. So I want to give some hope to all of you that there's a lot happening in the Indian MNC sector, Indian local firms as well, and they're doing a lot in this direction. So that's one part. I think closing comments would be that, look, when we look at environmental, social, and governance, what's very important is reporting, in my view, right? And what's also very important is a transparency and a framework which is consistent, right? So I'm saying today, if I'm an occupier or I'm an investor, I should be able to see a building's performance reported in the public domain. And today, technology enables us to report that performance real time. It's not difficult. All we need, and there are systems out there today, and Chris has spoken about ARC, right? If you just look at the raceway of the ARC, it is a fantastic metric to go by, right? So if you have buildings and businesses reporting their performance against ARC and having transparent mechanisms of sending that data into ARC, right? Which can be technology enabled as well. So that means I can have IoT systems reporting energy performance and sustainability performance into an ARC scoreboard. We need those kind of frameworks today formalized to what Gautam ji said initially as well, so that the reporting becomes transparent, it becomes seamless. I think performance reporting to me is an area for us to focus on. Very, very important. If you get the performance reporting right, then you can start building the incentives and regulations, right? Because firstly, you need to get a consistent framework for performance reporting. Then you can have cogent laws and incentives as well. So to me, that's an area for us to work on. When you talked of government buildings, I want to add another point there, Shrija, and take hope away from this discussion. All government buildings, new buildings, have declared, the government has declared that they will be compliant to the ECBC, Energy Conservation Building Code. That's India's code for energy conservation. So all buildings, new buildings. I know Pinny has a point. I've worked in the armed forces for 20 years of my life, and I know what state the government buildings are. But Pinny, we will make the difference there as well. I'm very, very sure, right? So yeah, we will. But I think the government is taking the right steps in mandating ECBC compliance. I think to me that was a big step because now you are setting an example at a governance level. And you raised a very important point. So, another takeaway from this conversation, which will give us all hope, is that, yeah, we are doing things right. We need to now make those step changes, right? And that's going to be important because we don't have the luxury of time, unfortunately. And I feel guilty as somebody who's now in his 50s, like we can't just leave it to our younger generation, right? We've done enough damage. That's so absolutely unfair and selfish. We spent the last 100 years plundering this planet, literally, and driving all other species to the brink of extinction. And now we're saying that no, the future generation holds a lot of promise. Damn it, we need to do something as well before we kick the bucket. We need to do something as well because we still have some time. At least, I think I do, to really make that difference. So, yeah, that's what I wanted to end this conversation on.
I will say just a couple of quick general observations. Two quick separate points. One is I do think, speaking to the public sector for a second, obviously everyone here is more expert than me in the specific circumstances in India. However, I will say that as a global issue when it comes to public sector engagement, we are looking for three things out of our government. We are looking for them to demonstrate leadership. We're looking for them to buy down the price curve, i.e. gain experience and traction, create early markets, and to reduce waste and inefficiency. We don't want that government building to be using more energy than it should, because ultimately we all pay for it. So there is such a strong public sector value proposition, win, win, win. Leadership, early adoption, and waste and inefficiency, that being advocates for that, there is a pattern. We know how to do it. Okay, so on the general point, I do want to just end with the enthusiasm. I don't think I can do justice what Rajat said about, that was perfectly said. Beyond that, I would say, look, this is a time where we have the tools. If we went back 10 years, we didn't have the information technology. We didn't have the sensors. We didn't have the schemas. We didn't have actually the appetite. Larry Fink hadn't written his letter yet. We didn't have these drivers. We didn't have commitments from firms like Microsoft. Now, I think we can be very proud and enabled by the vertical integration we see in the marketplace. We have corporate commitments, we have institutional investors, we have tools for portfolios, we have tools for buildings, we have tools for spaces, and we have the information technology to enable it. Now, I think as I think Penny said earlier, this is a question of will and ambition. And if we have the will and the ambition, there is nothing that we can't accomplish here. And as Gautam said, cost is no longer the primary barrier. It's about vision and execution. And if we can think about this emerging tool set and apply it to deliver social benefits, to benefit our tenants, to benefit our own companies, that is the moment we're in right now. And I think that is very tangible. It's available to every company, big or small. And so I hope we can end on, at least for me, on that optimistic note.
Okay, there's a huge dose of optimism coming from both Chris and Rajat. Both were extremely optimistic. Well, Rajat spoke on the fact that he would like to focus on performance reporting. Chris really spoke about the fact that, how there needs to be more robust systems on, performance measurement and essentially where we are headed, that, it has really gotten back into mainstream consciousness. I sort of want to get on to you now, Pinny, and then get on to Gautam for concluding remarks.
So I really think, the exciting times ahead. I see the rainbow across. It's not the beginning or the end of anything, I think it's just a journey everybody needs to take together. So to some of the points that, Gautam was making, or Rajat and Chris, is I think as, as an occupier, as a tenant, if the sales pitch to me is calling out some of the green initiatives or benefits of that, because everybody who's going in the market may not have that kind of knowledge or that kind of awareness, let's assume. It's their task, to really bring them up to speed, and say that, these are the benefits. Don't look at the cost or don't look at this, but this building has these benefits and this is the wellness that you will get for your employees. And you talk about it further to your employees and your, colleagues. And I think it can just drive that change. And of course, the government, like I already alluded to it, has to have the house right, get it right there, and then let's start, let it trickle to every small, big, large organization. And we as an organization, of course, are putting our best efforts and making sure we talk about it, we make sure we get our developers wherever we are, taking space or, going into tenancy, even educating them from that perspective. In smaller towns, even asking them that at least make a wheelchair path to make it accessible, even a small thing like that. And I think the change will happen. And I'm sure all of us collectively have brought in a lot of thinking, and people listening in, will take at least, even if they take 5% of it, I think we are in a winning card. Thank you, Shrija.
Okay. Gautam, you just heard all three of your co-panelists. A lot of enthusiasm and optimism coming to the fore here. What would be your quick concluding remarks? And I would like to play a quick game with all of you, rapid fire at the end of it. I know we are sort of already, running to past the time, but still I would like to have that element. So Gautam, quick one from you, and
So,
then
so I'd like to have a quick one because uh, just I wanted to share with you that this is a journey. This is not the beginning or not the end. We should not be complacent. And as far as my organization DLF is concerned, we never thought that pandemic will come and teach us about the ESG. And we had started this journey long back, and Penny and Rajat must be knowing, who are associated with us in DLF. And DLF focus on sustainability as a safety. It's we can say proudly that we are the only company in the world which who have 31.4 million square feet LEED Platinum certification from USGBC. And as far as the safety is concerned, of course, safety is just I want to touch is a very important aspect also. When you are safety conscious, you are very much focused on your day-to-day activities. So that also is going to lead us to a great extent to be organized, to be disciplined, and we are the only organization in the world. Again, we have 16 sword of honor from British Safety Council. That Penny and Rajat must be knowing that, being our partner. So end of the day, we should not be complacent, and it's a journey, and we should not any incident or any pandemic should not teach us to create our own awareness, and it should be automatic. That's my concluding remark.
that, Gautam. And now rapid fire with all of you. Pinny, I'll begin with you here. Let's begin with the woman and then get on to others. One interesting initiative that you have taken towards social responsibility and sustainability in your personal life recently.
Oh, tough one. You put me on the spot, Shrija. Okay, so I'll tell you, the pandemic drove everyone to wash your hands multiple times. And I looked out for how we can get a women enterprise organization who's producing organic soap and how they can grow with us as we have such a large demand. And guess what? We found them in Jharkhand, and it's a women-led organization. Absolute no energy using. They're using solar. They're growing their own little farm. They produce this soap, and we are going to be their buyers. I mean, we are their buyers. We're just waiting for the offices to open. and we are empowering their children to go back to school. And I hope from a small enterprise, I want to see them into a large enterprise.
Okay, wow, that's pretty thoughtful. One woman corporate leader that you look up to.
Uh, I'd look up to our CFO, Amy Hood. I think she's really shrewd, really smart, and she's got our company where it is as number one.
And what are you Netflixing these days?
The Crown.
Okay, I get on to you now, Chris. My question to you, the one I asked Pinny, what interesting initiative that you have taken towards social responsibility and sustainability in your personal life recently?
Oh, these questions are scary. I like this. One of our pandemic projects is we have lots of runoff from the roof and the street. So we worked with the state program to put in a big rain garden to stop that from flowing into our local rivers and streams. And so that was fun to actually see a very tangible project, digging out the ground and making that rain garden.
Okay, and if this world were a billboard, what would you write on it?
If the world was a billboard? Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Act on climate.
Okay. And what are you Netflixing these days?
Oh, good. My 15-year-old daughter is very into Grey's Anatomy. So unfortunately, we are binging Grey's Anatomy, and I'm embarrassed how far through we are.
Okay, that's interesting to watch. And if you were to name one corporate leader that you look up to, who would that be?
Oh, I'm not totally sure it's well. I got to give Larry Fink a little bit for the letter. That's important. But I'll also say Kamala Harris is the most inspiring person in my politics right now. So she deserves a lot.
Okay, Rajat, it's your turn now. And I think the question that I asked both Pinny is, you have to be one interesting initiative that you have taken towards social responsibility and sustainability in your personal life recently. What would that be?
What I decided the last year was actually 2019 was that within 7 kilometer radius, if I have to travel, I'll run to the place or I'll use my push bike or my cycle. So I don't use a vehicle. So if it's grocery shopping or it's, doing this and that or going out for even a coffee or a meal, I cycle to the place. So that's what I've been doing. And I've been doing that religiously. So there's a very interesting, application which is available out there for Android users, and you can actually track your own carbon footprint, and you can track how much you're reducing it. I've put myself and my son on it. And Chris, before she asked me about Netflixing, I'm a documentary guy, but my son is 15 as well, and he's into Grey's Anatomy. And I don't know.
I had another question for you, Rajat. If you were to do reverse pitch, and if you were to pitch one startup idea in the green space, which you think is non-existent right now, what would that be?
Oh, very interesting. Startup idea in the green space, which is non-existing. I don't think there's any startup idea which is not existing, but I do want a replacement for plastic. It's a wonder product, but that's a challenge that we as a humanity should tackle. We should find a replacement for plastic and completely remove plastic from our environment and usage altogether. So that's one idea that I would really push personally, right? So I have also plans, of course, of doing something interesting after I sort of retire. So I'll never retire from, hopefully from climate action. But so that's for another conversation, Shrija. But I think removal of plastics is something which I would want us to really pick up.
Yeah, I think all of us would hoot for that one, removal of plastic. Gautam, the last one with you. Pretty quickly, we'll just go through that. One interesting initiative that you have taken towards social responsibility in your personal life recently. What would that be?
Not sudden. It was just a continuation, and now I have become very punctual on my morning walk. That's one incident happened in my life. And I'm really irrespective of the temperature in northern part of the India. I'm very regular nowadays, getting up at the right time and doing that much what I can do before coming start my day score. And of course, as you are going to ask me, the next what is going to happen, what we are doing with the Netflix. I'm not a Netflix guy. I'm very much interested in the music and audio music kind of a thing. So I'm always involved in the music whenever I get time.
Okay, thank you, Rajat, Chris, Gautam, and Pinny. That was a very meaningful discussion, and thank you for your time and energy into this. I think we decoded some very meaningful aspects. We had some very meaningful and knowledgeable insights coming to the fore, some solutions for the government, for stakeholders at large, and I do hope, and I'm very confident that it will be extremely meaningful for our audiences and readers here. Thank you so much for your time and
Thank
energy.
you.
I really appreciate this. Until the time we see you next, goodbye and good luck. And here's wishing you and yours very good health in these times. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Shrija.
Shrija.
Thank
Wish
you.
you the
Thank you.
same.
Wish you
Thank
the same.